Fireworks on Capitol Hill, Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Democratic senators grilling her over the prosecution of President Trump's foes, including former FBI Director James Comey, and over the Epstein files. The White House tonight pleased with Bondi's performance. Here's Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, a defiant Attorney General Pam Bondi repeatedly clashing with Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who accused her of allowing President Trump to weaponize the Justice Department.
What was once the Department of Justice has become the Department of Revenge and Corruption.
Bondi challenged on her move to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey, just 6 days after President Trump publicly urged her to do so, posting, "Nothing is being done, and we can't delay any longer."
I'd like to know from you what conversations you've had with President Trump about the indictment of James Comey.
Senator, I am not going to discuss any conversations I have or have not had with the President of the United States.
Did you see that?
Hey everyone, Adam here. The scene is one of the most solemn in American governance, a confirmation hearing before the United States Senate. Under the glare of television lights and the weight of history, a nominee raises their right hand, swears an oath to tell the truth, and then begins the delicate dance of answering for their past and promising fidelity to the future. For the nominee, it is a ritual of passage. For the country, it is a vital checkpoint for integrity. The words spoken in that room carry the force of law. To deceive is not merely a political misstep, it is a potential federal crime. Now imagine that nominee is not a fresh-faced judge, but a seasoned political operative, a loyalist, taking the helm of the most powerful law enforcement agency on earth, the Department of Justice. Her name is Pam Bondi. Her patron is Donald Trump. And the testimony she delivered under oath is now being methodically dismantled by facts, by her own prior statements, and by a mountain of contradictory evidence.
Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal showing a picture of Bondi at the White House the night before Comey was indicted.
That's a great
James
picture.
Was James Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture, and there were a lot of people there that night.
The Attorney General also refusing to explain why the Justice Department closed its investigation into a close Trump aide. Border czar Tom Homan, who allegedly accepted a bag stuffed with $50,000 in cash in 2024 as part of an FBI bribery sting, and transaction allegedly caught on tape.
Is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
Bondi declining to say what happened to the $50,000 in cash or whether Homan even took the money.
General,
do you know?
I said that.
Do you know sitting here whether
All
he took
I
the
know
money?
is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche.
What was presented as assurance is being exposed as artifice. What was pledged as independence is being revealed as allegiance to one man over the law. This is not a political disagreement. This is a forensics report on a potential crime scene. Legal experts, fact-checkers, and former prosecutors are aligning the transcripts of Bondi's sworn testimony with the digital paper trail of her public life and the emerging facts of her tenure. The discrepancies aren't minor, they are fundamental, touching on the core of her fitness for office and her role in the most sensitive, democracy-shaking events of our time. And with each contradiction, the shadow over her grows longer and darker. Not just the shadow of scandal, but of perjury, of false statements to Congress, crimes punishable by years in federal prison. But the legal jeopardy does not end in the hearing room. It extends to the federal courthouse, where judges overseeing demands for transparency, particularly regarding the Jeffrey Epstein files, are meeting a wall of obstruction from Bondi's Justice Department. Their polite orders are being ignored. Their firm directives are being met with legally dubious delays and blanket redactions. The judiciary's patience is wearing perilously thin, and their language is shifting from requests to warnings and from warnings to explicit talk of contempt sanctions and criminal referrals. Two paths, both originating from Pam Bondi's actions, are now converging on a single terrifying destination, the doors of a federal penitentiary. One path is paved with her own sworn words, now allegedly false. The other is paved with her defiant actions against the courts. A judge hasn't sentenced her yet, but the legal groundwork is being laid. brick by damning brick, and the gate at the end of that path is being unlocked. This is the story of how the nation's top law enforcement officer may have placed herself directly in the crosshairs of the very justice system she was sworn to uphold. Act 1. The Confirmation Charade. In January 2025, Pam Bondi sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee seeking confirmation as Attorney General. The performance was a masterpiece of political theater. She struck all the right notes. With measured tones, she pledged independence from the White House. She vowed she would not be the president's personal lawyer, but the people's chief law enforcement officer. She promised to follow the law wherever it led, even if it caused discomfort for her powerful friends. To the casual viewer, it was reassuring. Then came the questions. Senators probed the rawest nerve: the 2020 election. Specifically, they pressed her on Donald Trump's repeatedly debunked claim that he had won the state of Pennsylvania. This was not a test of policy, but of basic allegiance to reality. A commitment to the rule of law is meaningless if one will not acknowledge legally settled facts. Bondi's response was a masterclass in evasion. She refused to retract the false claim. She would not state plainly that Trump lost Pennsylvania. She danced around the question with vague platitudes about concerns and process, effectively lending continued credence to the big lie under the solemn cover of a sworn oath. Fact-checkers pounced immediately. Her testimony was flagged, not for spin, but for direct contradiction of established, court-certified reality. But the deception ran deeper. Senators unearthed her prolific media appearances in the wake of the election. In one particularly explosive clip, Bondi had gone on Fox News and all but promised to prosecute the prosecutors who had investigated Trump and his allies. She named names, accused them of criminal conduct, and framed their lawful work as a conspiracy. Yet, under the Senate's hotlights, she dismissed these statements as mere campaign rhetoric, asserting she would never weaponize the DOJ for political revenge. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. The Bondi of the confirmation hearing, sober, law-bound, independent, bore no resemblance to the Bondi of the public record, a fiery partisan advocate promising retribution. Legal analysts began connecting the dots. Perjury, under Statute 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 101, isn't just about blatant, cartoonish lies. It can encompass deliberately misleading statements, omissions of material fact, and testimonial sleight of hand designed to create a false impression. Bondi's refusal to acknowledge Trump's loss, while privately, as some reports suggested, knowing the truth, could constitute exactly that. Her attempt to airbrush away her own inflammatory promises could be seen as a material deception about her intent and integrity. Act 2. The Oversight Stonewall. The charade continued into her tenure. In an October 2025 oversight hearing, Bondi was dragged back before Congress, this time to answer for her actions as Attorney General. The questions were more direct, the stakes even higher. Senators demanded answers about the DOJ's handling of the Epstein files, which were being released in a slow, heavily redacted trickle that suspiciously seemed to protect certain powerful names. They asked about communications with President Trump regarding potential indictments of his enemies, like James Comey. They inquired about the operational independence of ongoing investigations. Bondi's strategy shifted from evasion to outright stonewalling. She became a fortress of, "I cannot discuss ongoing matters." She hid behind broad, arguably abused claims of executive privilege and prosecutorial discretion. She treated congressional oversight, a co-equal branch of government conducting its constitutional duty, as a nuisance to be managed, not an authority to be respected. Senators from both parties grew visibly furious. They accused her of contempt for Congress, of actively obstructing their ability to perform oversight. The message was clear. The Attorney General was not being transparent. She was running a cover-up from the inside. For legal experts watching, this was more than a political spat. Obstruction of Congress is itself a crime. While a sitting Congress controlled by her allies would never hold her in contempt, the foundation was being laid. Every "I cannot answer," every dubious privilege claim was being transcribed and documented. It was creating a ready-made case for a future hostile Congress to pick up, charge, and pursue. Act 3. The Judicial Rebellion. Simultaneously, in federal courtrooms across the country, a separate but related drama was unfolding. Judges, pursuant to the bipartisan Epstein File Transparency Act, were issuing orders to the Justice Department to produce documents. The law demanded maximum disclosure. Bondi's DOJ responded with minimum compliance. They stalled. They produced documents in useless piecemeal fashion. They applied redactions so heavy the released pages were often more black ink than text, citing exemptions that legal scholars argued were wildly overbroad and inappropriate. The judiciary, an institution built on respect for its orders, does not react kindly to being ignored. The warnings began as gentle nudges in court orders. Then they became firmer directives. Now, according to court watchers and legal commentators, the language from the bench is escalating toward clear talk of sanctions and contempt of court. A judge holding the Attorney General in contempt is a nuclear option, but it is a tool on the table. It carries the power of fines, coercive penalties, and, most critically, the ability to make a criminal referral to, well, that's the rub. It would be a referral to the Justice Department, which Bondi runs. But here lies the ticking time bomb. A contempt finding from a federal judge is a permanent, devastating mark on Bondi's record. It would shatter any remaining pretense of her legitimacy. It would provide overwhelming ammunition for congressional contempt proceedings. And it would lie in wait, a ready-made criminal charge, for the day she leaves office and is no longer her own prosecutor. Judges are meticulously building the record that could justify this step, documenting each act of defiance, each flimsy excuse, each delay. They are quite literally clearing the path. The convergence, a perfect legal storm. Pam Bondi now sits in the eye of a perfect legal storm. From one direction blows the gale of her own sworn words, which fact-checkers and legal analysts are alleging are false. The charge, perjury and false statements. 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 1621, 1001. From the other direction comes the tempest of her official conduct, defying both congressional oversight and judicial authority. The charge, obstruction of Congress and contempt of court. Individually, each set of allegations is grave. Together, they form a devastating narrative of an attorney general who views the law not as a mandate, but as an obstacle to be circumvented in service of protecting power. This narrative transforms her from a political appointee into a potential criminal defendant. The legal precedents are chilling. Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer, went to prison for lying to Congress. Roger Stone was convicted for obstruction and witness tampering. The system has demonstrated it can and will prosecute those who lie under oath and obstruct investigations, even when they are close to power. Bondi's alleged conduct is a more elevated, more consequential version of the same crime. The final critical element is political will. Currently, Bondi is protected by a Republican House and her own control of the DOJ. This is a temporary shield, not an immunity. The 2026 midterms loom as a potential seismic event. If Democrats regain the House, the dynamic shatters. They would have the power to launch immediate aggressive investigations, subpoena the emails and memos that contradict her testimony, and hold live televised hearings that present the evidence side by side. Bondi's sworn statement versus the damning document. They could then vote to hold her in inherent contempt, an archaic but potent power allowing Congress to jail someone itself, or refer her for criminal prosecution to a future independent Justice Department. The evidence is not being lost. It is being cataloged in real time. Every clip, every transcript, every contradictory email is being archived by journalists, opposition researchers, and congressional staff. They are building the case file for a future prosecutor. The path to prison is not being paved with a single dramatic ruling, but with the quiet, meticulous accumulation of evidence and the escalating frustration of a judiciary that expects its orders to be obeyed. Pam Bondi gambled that loyalty to Donald Trump was the ultimate shield. She is now discovering that the oath she took to tell the truth and the orders of federal judges she is ignoring may prove to be far more powerful. The walls are not just closing in on the president she serves, they are closing in on her. The judge's gavel, the prosecutor's indictment, the cell door, these are no longer abstractions. They are the logical, legal endpoint of the path her own actions have cleared. All that remains is for someone with the authority and the will to take the final, decisive steps down that path.